welcome Carole in from the Women's Bookshop with another big read. What is it this week?
Well, this is a very important book. It's the Pride Festival happening at the moment, as people know, I'm sure. And we are launching this book in the Women's Bookshop next Tuesday the 19th at 6 o'clock because it is a very significant New Zealand lesbian novel. Aorewa McLeod was a lecturer in the English department for 37 years. She's retired now, and she ran for many years a 20th century women writers paper that was extremely popular. It was quite a famous paper, the Women, Have You Done the Women Writers paper, and Aorewa was very beloved by the students. And she has written this wonderful novel that is highly autobiographical. So it's really her life story. In the book she's Nio. She's not Aorewa, but Nio was very clearly Aorewa. And it's really the story of the history. I think this book is historically important because she's captured the history of the feminist movement, the lesbian movement, and the women's spirituality movement in the 70s and 80s and through into the 90s, in Auckland in particular, but in New Zealand. And any New Zealand women aged between sort of 50 and 80 now are going to recognise some of the events and may even be able to identify some of the characters. But what Aorewa says is it's fictionalised. A lot of the events did happen in real life, but they're fictionalised, and the names are all changed, of course.
Of course,
names
yes.
Are fictional names.
Lest anybody should be officially recognised.
Yeah. Yes. I could identify one or two people, but I'm not saying who. So it's wonderful. It's also intensely personal. So you get she and her fellow students in her very early university days going down to Nelson, driving an old dunger of a car down to Nelson and working as student psychiatric nurse aides because they earned lots of money. Some of them couldn't hack it, it was too difficult. Aorewa and one or two of her friends went back several years. And the work, I mean, she describes the work, it's quite grueling, extraordinary work they were doing with psychiatric patients. And it was down there that she met her first dykes. And of course, in those days, you couldn't say the word dyke or lesbian. We're talking about late 50s, early 60s. But she gradually realised these women were in relationships with each other, a number of them. And that was her first sort of coming across lesbian women.
Is there a special significance in the title? Who was that woman anyway?
Yes, it comes from Tonto and the Lone Ranger.
Oh, okay.
Because when the Lone Ranger leaves town, in every story, people say, who was that man anyway?
Yes.
So she's saying, who was that woman anyway? She then goes to Oxford University and has relationships with women there. And also, one of the things I loved as well was the literary references. Of course, she's a lecturer in English literature. And when she's in Oxford, she goes to visit the haunts of some famous writers. When she's back lecturing at Auckland University, she at one point rails against Milton, for example. She's getting absolutely frustrated with Paradise Lost. She's forced to teach it because the lecturer who normally teaches it is on sabbatical. And then she also discovers some unknown, as a scholar, she researches some unknown or unremembered New Zealand novelists. One called Basilina Penfold, who wrote all sorts of books that has disappeared. But she then also chronicles the self-therapy groups that women got into in the 80s, the women's spirituality movement, some of the difficulties and arguments in the lesbian movement, and whether there should be lesbian separatists separate from the feminist movement, and all those issues that
it was all very fevered at the time, wasn't it?
Yeah, and she sort of is respectful and I mean, it's quite witty, a lot of it. And you smile at some of the more extreme views of those days, but it's done in a lovely tone, a very respectful way.
And well, it sounds like something that mainly academics would enjoy. Would it have more general appeal?
Oh, no, it's not. It's not for academics at all. I mean, she's one of the things she does is she's very critical of the whole academic world.
Right.
Gently, but yes. No, it's a book absolutely for the general reader, including a very wonderful last section where she goes into rehab and deals with her, what has been described as functional alcoholism. And she goes into rehab, and her very long-term partner is waiting for her at the end of that very grueling process. So it's very positive.
Just like stirring stuff. Thank you very much, Carole.